Hi, this is Jim from RV4x40.com.
Hi, and I'm Chris.
And RV4x40.com is our channel on YouTube about RV tips and tricks and things we've done, places we've been, some upgrade information, things like that. We hope you enjoy the channel. Today we're going to talk about our trip from Haines to Skagway and a little bit of background before we do that. Alaska has something called the Alaska Marine Highway, which is considered part of their highway system. It's run by the state, and this is a group of ocean-going ferries, and they run from Bellingham, Washington, all the way up around the coast of Alaska out to the almost the end of the Aleutian Islands. It's some 3,500 miles all the way. This is not a particularly cheap way to go. The fare from, say, Bellingham up into Alaska is $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, depending upon the rig you're using and the size of what you're hauling and that kind of stuff. But one of the things that we talked about in going to Alaska, and this was something, our trip wasn't terribly detailed planned before we went. We knew we wanted to see Denali, we wanted to go to the Kenai Peninsula, and in particular, I had wanted to go to Haines because the information was that there were a lot of bears to be seen down there near the coast and other animals as well, other wildlife. And one of the appeals for me was to take the Alaska Marine Highway Ferry from Haines up to Skagway. So that was how our itinerary was planned. And if you looked at the last video, it covered the route into Haines. It loops up through Canada and back down into Alaska. Well, the trip from Haines up to Skagway is about 16 miles by ocean, and that was our plan. And that's what we planned to do, right?
Exactly, yes.
And how did that work out?
It did not work out well at all.
That's right. First problem was I was trying to book the trip by ferry on their online website, and because of the length of the rig, it really wasn't very friendly for how to do that. I got lost in some of their web pages, so we decided to go to the fare office or the ferry office right there in Haines and book our passage. We did that 2 or 3 days before we were planning on going, and it started out somewhat badly.
We went to the ticket office to get on their schedule to cross over to Skagway, and we accidentally gave them the wrong day, but we corrected it right away and thought everything was going smoothly, and we got our tickets and we had our plan in place and we're ready to leave.
Well, we thought we were ready to leave, so we checked out of the campground we were in, which would be normal. We head over to the ferry ahead of time. We go into the office to check in and see what we have to do to get on board the ferry. And it happens we got the same clerk that we had a couple of days before who had made the reservation. Now, I have to take at least partial responsibility for this because after we made the reservation, he gave us a big, thick stack of papers about the reservation, when it was, some rules and procedures and all this kind of stuff. And I admit I only skimmed that stack of papers. If I had read it correctly and read it in detail, I would have realized right then that it was for the wrong day, the following day. But I didn't read it in detail. We'd had the conversation with this guy and thought he had corrected it. But when we got there, it was not corrected. And he told us that there was really nothing he could do. He admitted a mistake. He said, yes, I screwed this up, but the ferry is full. There is already a waiting list that's longer than is likely to get on there, so it doesn't even make any sense to put you on the waiting list. The best I can do is schedule you for tomorrow. So what was your reaction?
Well, I was not happy at all about that. We were not able to continue on in that particular campground, which we did enjoy. It was right on the water and it was beautiful. So I would have been more than happy to spend one more night there. However, we were checked out and we were not able to return. And so our plans were pretty well shot.
Well, one of the things I had noticed in the 2 or 3 trips we'd taken up that road to the ferry and beyond that to the bridge where we saw the bears, but there were a couple of very wide spots beside the road, pullouts if you will, that overlooked the fjord right there, and so I knew we could boondock for the night. The RV is set up for it. We had plenty of water, the tanks were empty, all that stuff, so we had no trouble boondocking. So we went back down the road, pulled off into a side spot, Eventually, somebody else pulled in there with us and spent the night there also, and don't know what their story was. But there were two of us camped there for the night. We watched the ferry go by. We watched other cruise ships going in and up and down the fjords, and it really was a very pleasant evening spending it there.
So our mishap with not being able to get out that day on the ferry turned out to be a real blessing. It was beautiful where we stopped. It was right along the road and just to pull out, as Jim said, but it was beautiful, and we thoroughly enjoyed sitting and watching the water traffic and just being right there on, even closer to the water than our campsite was. We were just up the bank from the water, and it was beautiful. Thoroughly enjoyed that evening.
So the next day we got up. We had, I think, a 3 o'clock departure, something like that. So we get up. We're heading up to the ferry at about 1 o'clock to get up early in the line, and everything was great at that point. We had separated the tow vehicle, the Jeep. Chris was going to drive it on board the ferry, so we didn't have to tow it and deal with that trying to board the ferry. I was in line to be the second or third RV to go onto the ferry. The ferry came in, everything looked good. They offloaded a number of boats, and there's some video I have and some pictures we'll have later on in this video of that process, which was very interesting. Stuff just comes off, and they pull a lot of things out of the bottom side of that ferry. And so everything is done. They have the ferry done. They have the first guy lined up. He's actually got a fifth wheel, which he's going to have to back down the ramp into the boat. No big deal. He seemed to know what he was doing. And so he starts down the ramp, and they stop him. And then basically nothing more happens for really 2 to 3 hours. Eventually I got out, went around and started seeing if I could find out what was going on. And it turns out, and I don't understand why they could offload the ferry, but there was something wrong with the mechanism at the dock where they felt they could not safely load vehicles back onto the ferry. And so there's people running around. Eventually an electrician's truck shows up, and he's looking at stuff, and they're trying to find out what's going on, but nobody's making any progress. And I happen to be on shore near one of the ground crew, and she's got a radio in communication with the captain of the vessel, and I hear the captain telling her that Coast Guard regulations are going to require him to leave in about 20 minutes. He cannot hold the ferry there any longer than that. So unless they get the boarding process started, he is going to leave. And so that is exactly what happened. He had to take the ferry away. There were a few walk-on passengers that were going to Skagway. They were able to get on board, but none of the vehicles were allowed to board. And so at this point, kind of pandemonium breaks loose because everybody's trying to figure out what to do. And honestly, the ground crew there was just simply not prepared. They apparently did not have procedures for how to deal with something like this. So they're in a state of chaos. The crowd, of course, is wanting to know, what do I do? How do I get there? What can I get? How can I get my money back? And now another part of the story comes into play. One of the interesting details when you're full-time in an RV is getting packages delivered. And I use Amazon extensively for a lot of stuff that we get. And I'm not sure now exactly what it was. I had a piece of photographic gear that I had ordered and was having it shipped to do general delivery at the post office in Skagway. And so this wasn't a package I could just say right off and forget about it and skip Skagway. We really had to go to Skagway to get this piece of gear that I had coming. Now, it was 16 miles by ferry, roughly boarding time and everything, about a 90-minute cruise up the waterway. It's, if I remember right, about 380 miles around from Haines to Skagway by road. It goes back up through Canada, over across, and back down. There's a Google Earth map I'll show you here in a minute in the video of that route as what it takes. And so we're just trying to figure out, how do I get a refund of the several $100s I pay for this ferry ride? I just want to make sure that was taken care of. Initially, we were told that we must stand in line at this ticket office until we talk to an agent to confirm everything if we want a refund. It turns out later on I found out that was not true. I simply could have left and gotten a refund by going to their website or calling them or whatever. But we're standing in line with 100 other people trying to get their situation resolved. And we're trying to be polite and trying to give them time. And just all I wanted to know was what I had to do to get my refund. And eventually we got up to the front of the line. We found out that no, we can't go tomorrow. No, we can't go the next day. I think it was about 5 days before there was an open spot on the ferry that we could actually get a reservation for. So we'd already figured we were probably going to have to drive, and that kind of cemented it. We didn't want to spend an extra 5 days there and needed to get on with our trip. So at about 6 o'clock in the evening, we left to drive from Haines, Alaska, back through Canada, back down to Skagway.
So the days are long in Alaska, and that was to our benefit, but eventually night fell and we're still driving and driving and driving. And we finally, about maybe 1 in the morning, decide we can't keep going much longer. And all the rest stops indicate that we have seen, which were not many, were telling us that there was no overnight camping. One of the reasons we kept going and going. However, we finally had to stop, and we pulled up into this one where there were there was at least one, and before the morning there was another one RV parked in this particular area. So we stopped for the night, and it turns out we covered up the no overnight camping sign. So we could kind of claim that we did not actually see it, because we didn't.
Well, no, actually, truth be told, I saw the sign and I purposely parked the RV in front of it just for orderliness, I guess, so that it wasn't visible. And if we got a knock on the door, I was going to tell the officer, gee, I didn't see that sign at 1 o'clock in the morning when I'm tired. But the bottom line was it was okay. There were no issues with parking there. We did spend the night. It was overnight. We didn't stop until 1 o'clock in the morning. Of course, it was light until about 11. So we stopped. We had a night there. We went on the next day into Skagway. So at the end of the day, there was no real harm, no foul. It wasn't the trip that we planned on. At the time, it was very aggravating to be on the road that late at night. And it was very aggravating to not be able to get out of there sooner. When if someone had told me just go and claim your refund, I would have left 2 or 3 hours earlier, which would have made life somewhat easier. But like a lot of things in life, they're very aggravating at the time. Once a little bit of time passes, you go back and say, wasn't that an interesting experience, or even wasn't that a fun experience? Drive was fine, no big deal with that. It was something that we went on, and so that was our attempt to take the Alaska Marine Highway around from Haines to Skagway. Didn't work. Not sure if we go back to Alaska, I would try to do it again. It would be worth it, but at the time it was what was in our plans and what we wanted to do. So, hope you've enjoyed the video.
And we'll look forward to seeing you next time.
In the meantime, if you'll find us on the highways and byways of America, hope you'll join us. Maybe we'll see each other along the way. Remember, keep her between the ditches. If you like our videos, we'd appreciate it if you would subscribe. Give it a thumbs up. If you want to be notified when we post new videos, you can click on the bell icon and you'll get an email when we post a new video. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.